Hello again, everybody, and welcome to this presentation on CLIL. And today we're going to focus on some aspects and some terminology related to CLIL that is specifically important for the TKT test. So we've titled this presentation, What is CLIL? But the main goal here is to go behind the term and highlight some key elements and definitions that we need to know when taking the TKT test. So let's begin with what CLIL is. Well, is CLIL a method? If you go into the literature, you will see some scholars referring to CLIL as a method, while others refer to CLIL as an approach. Most of the scholars that I've read, particularly, refer to CLIL as an approach, because in reality, CLIL doesn't come with a list of suggestions to be applied universally. In fact, the methodology you're going to use to teach your CLIL lesson may come from different content areas. For example, if I'm teaching a math lesson, or if I'm teaching math through English, the methodology that I'm going to use is going to be slightly different than if I'm teaching science through English. So this will vary, right? So because CLIL involves, as the third bullet point highlights here, the integration of language and curriculum content, a lot of the methodology itself will come from the content area that you are teaching through English, or by using the additional language if it's not English. All right, so that needs to be really clear so that we understand how to define CLIL. So, as I've highlighted, CLIL can be taught with a second, third, or additional language, sometimes referred to as the target language, right? Which is the language that the students are developing as they learn that content area. And for this reason, CLIL presupposes extensive support and strong pedagogy. Because if you're teaching math not in the student's first language, but in that additional language, so you're going to have to provide some support, both linguistically and from the content area itself, in order to make sure that the students understand and advance in that area. All right? So how effective is CLIL? Well, research data on CLIL is by now extensive. And the one that you see here, the summary you see here, has been taken from Kay Bentley's book, the TKT course CLIL module, which is a very good book for preparing for the CLIL test, for the TKT test. I highly recommend it. And basically, this is a summary of what you can find in the book. Learners are more confident even with their first language, along with their non-native language, or the additional or the target language. So they become confident in both. Learners develop more extensive vocabulary in both languages as well. CLIL leads to better language proficiency in general. And also, the subject knowledge of CLIL students is comparable to the subject knowledge developed by students who take classes in their first language only, who are not in the CLIL program. So that's interesting, because it shows that there's no loss. And this is an interesting finding, because if you compare it to other types of bilingual studies, for example, studies conducted on bilingual children in Canada, those are not necessarily CLIL students. Some of these studies talked about a delay in developing vocabulary, which, according to the data found in this book that is cited here, doesn't happen to be the case in CLIL. So that's good. That means that there's been a progress there, right? How is CLIL offered? Well, there is a soft and a hard version of CLIL, and the difference between them is the focus. Soft versions of CLIL usually take the shape of a language class in which content is taught. But hard versions of CLIL, they usually can be seen as content areas taught in an additional language. So for this reason, most of the immersion versions of CLIL usually refer to hard CLILs, okay, hard CLIL versions, right? So it's very hard for you to see soft CLIL in an immersion format, right? You're going to see more hard CLIL versions using immersion. CLIL courses can be 15 hours, a semester or a year, or sometimes last a whole semester or a year, or can be condensed into 15 hours in maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks in the semester. It depends. There are some schools that teach CLIL 50% of the time. There are some schools who teach CLIL 20% of the time. And there are some schools that expand the language component of students. For example, I'm recording this from Brazil, and I know that there are some schools in Brazil that instead of having 2 English classes a week, they expand those classes to 4 or 5, and then they turn the language class into a CLIL class, and that lasts for the whole year. That's still a variation of soft CLIL, but it is CLIL, right? So CLIL classes can be led by the content or the language teacher. Of course, the content teacher needs to be capable of using the additional language to teach her or his content, as much as the language teacher needs to be capable of teaching that content area in the additional language that he or she is responsible for. Some schools also have teachers collaborate, and plan and work together. And that has been a good solution to a lot of schools. A key element of CLIL are the 4 C's. That is a very important concept for you to understand before taking the TKT CLIL test. So 2 of those concepts are here, and they are cognition and culture. So cognition refers to cognitive skills that the students need not only to learn the content, but develop the language skills. And thinking skills and higher and lower order thinking skills, which you can find in Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy refers a lot to higher order and lower order thinking skills. And those are skills that go from remembering, memorizing, all the way to applying, and then analyzing and creating, etc. Right? We're going to address Bloom's taxonomy on a different video. Culture is also one of the 4 C's of CLIL, sometimes called citizenship in some curriculum or curricula. Culture refers to students keeping open attitudes or having open attitudes, developing global and local perspectives, or understanding how their local perspective connects to a more global one, and vice versa. And CLIL also promotes multilingualism, which is that the more languages the student speaks, the better, right? Because we're not here saying, well, this additional language is more important than your language 1. No, both languages are important, and the more you know, the better. So CLIL is an approach that recognizes the importance of multilingualism. Very, very important point. The other 2 components are communication and content. Communication involves intensive language production or intense language production. Higher student talking time than teacher talking time. And how is that accomplished? By using collaborative pedagogies, active learning, right? The pedagogies needed for CLIL are much different from the pedagogies used for teaching a content area in language 1, because you want to create opportunities for students to engage with that content using the additional language or the target language. So collaborative systems that encourage student communication. Those are very, very, very important. In content, what do we need to know about this? Well, any subject can be taught through CLIL, right? And some schools opt for modules in which subjects are combined, so the content is cross-curricular, so that you're not teaching math or science through an additional language, but you're teaching all those subjects combined in a project that requires that the teacher incorporates the subject or these subjects. And that's about it for the 4 C's. So what are the language you need to talk CLIL? Well, 2 very basic concepts that you need to know for the TKT test are the concepts of BICS and KELP. And those concepts were introduced by Jim Cummins, who is a Canadian educator. And you can find a lot of his papers online, a lot of his videos, actually. He's still active and very productive and producing really, really good work, really useful work to help bilingual teachers. And he came up with 2 concepts that are used in bilingual education and in CLIL. And these concepts are BICS and CALP. BICS stands for Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills, and CALP stands for Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency. Basically, BICS refers to everyday language. So traditionally speaking, when students used to go to a language course, when they go to a language course, to a Spanish course or to an English course, they're developing BICS. They're learning a language for everyday communication, for everyday purposes. But when you are studying a course, a subject in another subject, then you need CALP. You need the academic language for that subject area or content area. So CALP is school language, right? Even native speakers, they develop CALP when they go to school, right? Your parents may not teach you concepts of chemistry or math, but you learn those concepts when you go to school in your first language. So that's your CALP, right? So why is this important? Because in CLIL, it's important that students learn both BICS and CALP, not just everyday language. Very, very important. Some other language terms related to BICS and CALP and to CLIL. First of all is content obligatory language. So those are the words and structures and functions. They're essential to a particular lesson. So if I'm doing a lesson on fractions for math, I need to know, I need to teach my students, or my students need to know what a numerator is, what a denominator is, what to simplify a fraction is. And those are all structures and words, vocabulary that is related to that content area. And content compatible language refers to everyday language used for that subject and for communication. So if I ask my students who are not native speakers of English to open the book to a certain page, they need to know what this means, to open a book. This is not necessarily content-specific language, but it's language used for communication in English in general, right? Which refers to BICS in this case. And translanguaging is something that a lot of CLIL teachers do, especially when introducing new concepts or at the start of a CLIL program, is when you mix the language one with the target language. So maybe you say a sentence in the target language, but you add a new word in language one, and then you say that sentence again, and you replace that word with the same word in the target language. So that's translanguaging, is moving back and forth between language one and the target language. So those are some key terms that you will need for your TKT test. And where did I get all this from? Well, this is a free resource available, and the link is here, put together by Cambridge. This is the glossary, the TKT CLIL glossary, which is a booklet with all the terminology you need for CLIL, everything that can be on the test. So I highly recommend it, not only as a source of information, and this is the source I have used for this video, and also as a resource for you to develop this specific vocabulary. So I hope you have enjoyed the video, and see you next time.